Hey everybody, I wanted to call your attention to an article I found on Christmas Day. You'd think I wouldn't have been online then, but I was. And this article was originally published in the San Francisco Chronicle, but that's a pay site, so I found it somewhere else. It's by Joe Mathews. It's called The Rose Bowl Game is Dead. And since Nebraska is now an occupant or a member of the Big Ten Conference, yeah, I thought the article was interesting. And I'm trying something different here, a little bit of reaction videos where I react to articles because I think it'd be fun. I think it'd be an easy way for me to provide content that's interesting, and that's what we're looking for in the off season, or at least that's what I'm looking for. And we could have fun together. It's my idea of fun. John Johnson, CornNation, please subscribe to this channel. Tell me what you think of my videos. Leave me comments, and I am going to ask you questions throughout the off season because I find people interesting and I'm interested in your perspectives. But this article about the Rose Bowl game being dead, the guy goes on to talk about how, the Rose Bowl game is, the playoff is coming in, and how the Rose Bowl here was known as the granddaddy of them all, first played by the University of Michigan Stanford on January 1st, 1902, and it started the entire bowl system. So really, I think when you look at this, you're kind of going, okay, is he really just talking about the Rose Bowl, or is he talking about all the bowls? Because we're looking at an expanded playoff system coming in, and you have to wonder: are people going to care about the bowls? I mean, I care about watching the rest of the Big Ten teams. They're going to play in their bowls, and I'll watch some other games if I think they're interesting. I don't. I hope that they don't go away. I know some people call them meaningless because they're like, they don't count for anything. But you know what? They're fun. Wisconsin versus Oklahoma State last night was kind of interesting, even though Oklahoma State is missing gobs of starters. But the Rose Bowl started everything. 1902 was a long time before any bowls really took off, and now we have 80 gazillion of them, which people complain about too. But let's go back to this article. Rose Bowl incubated a different tradition, inspiring the creation of the college football bowl games, which brought together America from different regions. I mean, Nebraska participated in the Rose Bowl. I think it was 1941 against the Stanford Indians. They were then called the Indians. I think we lost. That's a piece of history I should go back and examine for us this off season. But they had to get there by train. It took days. Just get on a plane. I'm pretty sure that's how they traveled. Maybe that's the subject of a video. If you'd like to hear more about that, let me know. But you had the Rose Bowl was the Pac-12, the Pac-10, and the Big Ten getting together on an annual basis, the two best teams, and then they played. And then mostly the Big Ten went out there, and because they were playing in California's backyard, and they usually were playing a Pac-10 team that was playing in their own backyard, they lost a lot of those games, like Nebraska always going to the Orange Bowl and playing a Florida team in their own backyard, which makes no sense. But why would it make sense when college football itself doesn't make any sense? One of the things I remember about the Rose Bowl when I was a kid is not the Rose Bowl. It was the tournament parade, the Tournament of Roses, and getting up on New Year's Day and watching the beautiful floats, because I just thought it was kind of weird that people took these bazillion flowers and they grew all these flowers just to create these floats or something. It was enthralling. It was interesting. And then you got to watch decent football games. So I've been at this a long time, since I was like, I don't know, 8 or 9 probably. But let's go back and let's see this. The guy complains throughout this article that, the Rose Bowl resisted this push of the college football playoff, and they realized that you can't stand against an oncoming train and not get run over and just destroyed, right? So the Rose Bowl decided that, as the guy says here, the Rose Bowl signed its own death warrant this fall, giving up not only its traditional East-West matchup regions, but it's also its traditional time on the afternoon of New Year's Day, right? Instead, the Rose Bowl will be one of the playoff games, likely a quarterfinal, which, is better than just completely going away. He talks about how the Pasadena game officials and city leaders shamelessly spun the death of the traditional game as some kind of victory. More tourists might come to our hometown because of greater excitement around the playoff, they've said. But that's nonsense. Pasadena needed to keep a college football game because it needs the revenues from the broadcast to help fund the Rose Parade, which is something I loved and something I find interesting to this day. And further on down here, he comes down here and he says, this is a sign of the apocalypse. If you'll notice here, because we do not, why? Okay, this guy he mentions is a self-described enlightened doomsayer, a philosopher of apocalypse. He argues that humanity is on a suicidal course headed straight for catastrophe. Why? Because we don't respect the sacred things. There's a link there. I'm not clicking on it. I don't know what these California people are up to, but I don't want to know. We're going to stick with this article. So the thing is this is one more tradition that's going to get destroyed by, a giant money grab, really, is what the expanded playoff system is. And when you look at the Rose Bowl, it's a very old stadium. And you kind of look at that and you go, this is a metaphor for us throwing away old things. As he says, we don't respect the sacred things. You could argue about whether or not the Rose Bowl is sacred or not. And I'd like to hear your comments on that. But on the other hand, I live in Minnesota. I watched a lot of football games and I went to a lot of events at the Metrodome. And now that we have US Bank Stadium, I wouldn't go back to the Metrodome. There's nothing sacred about that boring piece of crap stadium. But when you go into US Bank Stadium, it has one huge thing. I mean, it has skyboxes, it has the club seats, it has every amenity you could possibly imagine. It is a beautiful, big stadium. And if you're going to ask me, do I want to see a college football playoff game there? Or do I want to go into an old crusty stadium? And maybe if I looked at Memorial Stadium in Lincoln and I said, it's kind of an old crusty stadium. I mean, look at the seats, for God's sakes. They're not comfortable. Yet people pile in there by the thousands. If you try to change anything, people freak out because of tradition. And then, but are these sacred things? Or is this just a sign that we're moving on to something else? I realize there's a lot of greed and there's a lot of money involved in this. And we will throw away tradition in a heartbeat if there's money involved. But is it bad? Does it really signal the demise of college football as we know it? Are we moving to more of a NFL model, as I've said recently in podcasts over and over? I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. And like I said earlier, this is kind of a new format I'm trying out to see if I could here's the key. I deal a lot with fatigue. I've said that over and over. I need to be able to make videos easily, and this may be one way that I could pump out content without a lot of editing. And then the other thing I am going to try this off season is some narrative storytelling. So if you want to know more about the 1941 Nebraska Stanford Indian Rose Bowl, I could research that and do a video about it. Let me know. I hope you're doing well. It's almost New Year's, so Happy New Year. Go Big Red.